Productive Pastor 100 questions and answers. What's going on, friends? In here, finally, we're calling this episode 100, but we had 99.5. There's actually a couple of preview episodes before we rebooted, but in spirit, this is episode 100. And I really want to do Q&A. I've never done much Q&A online at all, but I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of questions in email, on the internet, in the Productive Pastor community on Facebook, all those sorts of things, text messages. I get these questions a lot, and I thought, let's do an episode. Let's aggregate. Also seems like a great way to celebrate 100 episodes of, this iteration of Productive Pastor. So I'm excited to do this. We're going to jump in. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be able to cover all of the questions that I got. So we'll probably have another one of these, later on down the line. I'd save them for when things get hectic and squirrely, because they got hectic and squirrely over the last couple weeks a lot. But we're here now. We're going to do it. We're going to do the Q&A. And if you've got something that isn't covered here that you want to hear covered on a future episode, you know what you can do? You can reach out. Come find me on Twitter at RevChadBrooks or inside the Productive Pastor community. And I'd love to, get that on a future episode. That might be a way to kind of keep things trucking a little bit quicker of a way anyway. So, we're going to quit talking about that kind of stuff right now. Go into this and answer some of these questions. Now, like I said earlier, these came through in a lot of different places. Some of these I've got names. Some of them were happening like randomly, and I was saving some solid ones that I've gotten, via DMs, that kind of stuff. They wanted to just answer these in this format because I feel like they were really, really important. We're going to go straight into this. Got one from Joey Bates on Productive Pastor Community saying, do I have a system for keeping highlights or notes from books? I did an episode about this a little while back on how not to waste your reading. But this is what I do. I use Readwise. I pay for the pro version of that. I think it's like $5 a month maybe, or I might pay like a certain amount of money a year. I can't remember how I do it or how much it is, but it's valuable. It's worth the money because it tracks all of my digital reading and also my analog reading. My digital reading, whether it's on the Kindle app on my iPad. I've actually started reading just at my desktop a decent amount if I'm reading Kindle. I also use a couple other services where I can clip things off of longer articles. I can send tweets off of Twitter or Twix or X or whatever it's called into Readwise. And then they've got a fantastic app for your phone that allows you to take a picture of things and then highlight the text off the picture, send that into Readwise. I also use a tagging system for just straight analog books. And I go through this in that episode about, how not to waste your reading. And I talk through what I'd keep up with and that sort of thing. Now, the second part of his question was, does this go into a database? What do you use? Readwise will export into all sorts of things. I have it currently exporting right now into Notion and into Evernote, although I primarily use it through Evernote. But to be honest, Readwise, just the desktop, the web version of theirs, it's strong enough. 9 times out of 10, that's kind of where I go anyway. But I like it because I can just go into Evernote or Notion, just search a word, and it pulls up every single thing that comes from there. So, that's how I handle that. Got some stuff coming from Andrew Neely. Andrew is a missionary pastor in Okinawa, so he has come on to workshops, that kind of stuff before. I love his perspective because it's so unique, because it's outside of my own. He kind of had a lot of questions, and so I'm going to go through just some of those together. And one of the things he talks about is how do you keep your lower strengths from sabotaging your ministry? I'm a massive Clifton Strengths fan. I'm a certified Gallup Clifton Strengths coach. I love strengths. And one of the things I talk about a lot is this. There's a way that you can discern. It's an exercise I take folks I'm coaching strengths through with where you understand what your unnatural strengths are. And those are normally, the bottom 10 to 12 to 15 strengths as part of the 34 strengths. And that's what I tell them. Anytime you feel the temptation to be operating in that way, what that should be like an indicator light that something is going on to make you act outside of yourself. And so when I really answer that question, Andrew, it's not to keep them from sabotaging you. I think you can sabotage yourself when you're trying to work inside of those strengths. And instead, the more you understand strengths and you know those, when you begin feeling like you have to have that or you're inadequate in some way, really taking a step to pull back, think a little bit, and ask yourself the question, what would it be like for me to take care of this task or do this thing or lead in this way in a way that is really strong? One of my natural strengths, or one of the strengths that's in your side of your top 10. So that's how I would answer that. A couple of things going on about this. What's the most important thing to keep analog at church? Andrew said that. I'm not exactly sure, really what that means, Andrew, but this is what I will say that I have learned. I think that no matter how you keep it, whether analog or digital, I use a combination of both. And to be honest, lately, I'm more analog than not. I think just keeping a to-do list that is right in front of you matters more than anything else. So whether you're doing that inside of some to-do list app, whether you're a fan of what I love, the Trello weekly dashboard, and you're dropping stuff into that as that comes along, or you just have a piece of paper in your pocket. I mean, I went through a phase last year where I was just not in front of a computer, or I was in places where I thought it'd be rude to pull my phone out to make a note. I just kept a folded up sheet of copy paper, folded into fours, in my pocket, and I could just add things into there. So I think as far as what stays analog, I really feel like it's important to keep that to-do list just accessible in whatever way, shape, or form. And I'm going to add something onto this that you didn't ask, but what is important to keep digital? I really feel like churches need to begin understanding signups and how to organize and manage and sort folks and to let folks engage in tactical ways in the church, to be doing that digitally only because you can link it into a database. It's just so much quicker, that sort of thing. So I kind of flipped your question on there a little bit for you, but just to pop that. The last question from Andrew is this. He said, what's some of the signs that a pastor needs to cut back outside work or add in some outside work? I think that if you're bivocational, I think that you need to really have a clear expectation, understanding of what the financial needs are for the family. I think that you need to make to figure out, am I working bivocationally to support half of my income, or as my friend Eric Hoke, who did an episode last summer, his whole term he uses is co-vocational. And that's when, you're pretty much funding your life and your family from a job outside of the church, and you're working inside of the church to pursue ministry and passion, and you're not getting a substantial amount of income from it. So I think really is what you need to know what your needs are. But all that to say, I think no matter where this is happening, where this is coming, I think having very, very clear-cut expectations are very important and are very strong, because if there's no clear-cut expectations, I think it's significantly easy for the pastor to feel like, or anybody that's in ministry, period, to feel like it's their responsibility to take care of everything. And, taking care of everything is going to be impossible. Taking care of everything is going to burn you out. Taking care of everything is also going to probably decrease the impact and health of the ministry anyway. So I hope that kind of answered that question a little bit. I got bunch of stuff came in from some other areas. We're going to talk about that. I got a question about this. What are the best strategies for managing a reactive schedule while dedicating time to strategic projects in ministry? I talk about reactive versus responsive and reactive versus proactive all the time. One of my main conversations here is part of the podcast. And there's a couple ways to go through that. I think number one, that time audit, and I've got a free tool to help you do that time audit. That's so important, just to be aware of, like, what are you spending your time doing? I think the first strategy to move forward with that is have a clear understanding of where you are spending your time. I actually made a new template that I'm using as part of my working notebook, which I use digitally. This is just a task manager to keep track of all of the things I have gotten done that day, because so much is going on right now in my own vocational life as I do several different things. And I've got a fun update that's going to come out in the future about what that might look like. But I just have learned I need to have a task manager. And sometimes it's really healthy just knowing these are all the things I did. These are all the things I might need to move forward, because honestly, it was overwhelming, and it was more stuff than I could notate inside of that weekly dashboard. Now, the weekly dashboard is the thing that keeps me on track, that manages a high view and like a medium level view. And my working notebook is managing the day-to-day in huge, huge ways, because that's our productivity systems. Whatever system we design, it's going to need to be flexible. It's going to have to be able to move and shape with you as ministry moves and shapes. And so that first strategy really is going to be about having an idea of what you are spending your time doing. The second piece of this is if it's really a strategic project, you need to have been able to hammer that down into some very specific action steps. If you've not gotten it down to the level of individual action steps yet, it's going to be really, really easy to just default to reaction, default to the things that come across your desk, default to the people that walk into your office that are anxious, that are nervous, that are wanting you to jump up and react. Another thing I think is helpful as part of this discernment process, and I talk about this in season 1, it's also part of the Becoming Productive course, is understanding tasks in the terms of draining, dealing, and developing. That will help you understand that, a lot of times reactive tasks will probably be draining and dealing tasks. And if you know you're living primarily inside of that zone, then danger is coming, Will Robinson. That should be another one of those pressure indicators that things are about to blow. And I feel like the place that we can plan our schedule the most is going to be inside of the realm of those developing categories, but then also the dealing things that are just administrative that for this point in time right now, you have to be taking care of that. But, pop into season 1 of the podcast to hear a lot about that, or the Becoming Productive course gives a lot of very, tactical, tangible ways to discern those things, move through those things, some killer worksheets, that kind of stuff. The next thing, if somebody says, can you suggest some practical tools for managing pastoral care more efficiently? I use Trello. I talk about it all the time. No surprise right here. I have a whole course on using Trello for ministry. I think especially when you have more than one person doing pastoral care, or you have more than 2 or 3 people that need care at any given point in time, I love using Trello for this because it has this visual thing right in front of you of seeing where people are, where you can leave notes, you can leave updates, you can assign other people to check in on stuff, all of that. Now, yes, you can do that in your database, but I'm a visual person. I've talked about the paradigm of productivity for the engineers and productivity for the artists. I'm an artist. I love to be able to look and see every single thing in one place. And that's why I love Trello for so many different solutions, especially for pastoral care, especially for any sort of people management to where there's an ongoing process. I think Trello, really takes care that that's being knocked out all the way. Another question in saying, how can I make sure I'm dedicating enough time to sermon preparation despite having a busy schedule? I've said this before. The sermon is the most expensive thing in the local church. You might be saying, Chad, that sermon doesn't cost any money. How are you saying that? Well, this is my logic behind it, okay? In most churches, the most expensive line item in the budget is compensation. It's staff and pastoral compensation. And in most places, the most expensive staff member is going to be the person who's preaching primarily. And this is the thing. If you preach a clunker every now and then, I don't think people are going to care that much. But if the sermon is just consistently subpar, or imagine if you don't preach a sermon for 2 or 3 weeks in a row and you get up in front of the congregation at worship and say, hey, friends, it was a really, really busy this week, so I didn't prepare a sermon, so we're just going to skip straight into the benediction. Folks will be knocking on your office door. That's the thing that's expected to happen. Good preaching is actually good stewardship. And somehow that line of thinking helps so many people realize that it's worth it, developing the priority of what does it take to preach and preach well. I think good preaching is paramount to the health of the local church. But this is what I would do. If you have a busy schedule, I'd do a couple things. Number one, I would try to figure this out. I would try to figure out what is the best time of day for me to be doing deep thinking work. You can go back to the last episode, 99.5, where I talk about Cal Newport with my friend Colin. The idea of deep work is super, super important, but deep work needs environments, it needs time, and it needs a little bit of preparation. You figuring out, doing those 3 things, saying, hey, I do my best work on sermons in this place, and I do it best at this time of day, and I do it best when I know these sorts of things are taken care of. Figuring out the environment for you to do good sermon work and then defend it like it is the Alamo. Unless there is this absolute utter emergency that cannot be pushed off for a couple of hours, you don't mess with it. You don't mess with it. The people who might have access to do not mess with them during this time. It has to be like a kid is on the playground and they manage to cut off a hand and foot and reattach them on their own, and we absolutely have to respond to this. It needs to be that protected because you're going to need that level of time. The next layer of this is just to know, how much time you need. How much experience, with the experience that you have, I'll tell you what, I've been preaching weekly now for almost 16 years. It takes me a lot less time now than it used to. And what's so interesting is, it's not because I'm researching less. I'm actually pretty much researching the exact same amount of time. But I've learned how to prep to preach. And I've learned how to not chase rabbits. I've learned the value of having a sermon calendar I'm working off of. And and since I have that, I'm always kind of doing a little bit of work ahead. I need 6 hours now. That's what I've learned. I need 6 to 7 hours, and I'm going to spend 2 or 3 hours of that on research, about an hour of that on outlining, and then I'm going to spend the rest of it crafting the actual sermon, the preaching part of it. That's what I need, but I've been doing this for a while. When I was earlier in ministry, I needed like 15 or 18 hours because I was still developing my style. I was still learning how to prep. I was still feeling the need to read every single thing I had on that passage and going through 10 to 12 commentaries and finally realizing, especially like right now, I'm preaching in Acts right now. And I'll be honest, my stack of Acts resources next to me, I think is probably like 14 books deep. And I'm working on the third sermon in the series right now, and I'm realizing I'm using the same 3 commentaries. And so this week when I sat down, I just started with those 3, and I realized when I got to the end of it, I was like, I've got one question left that needs a bit of research, and I think I know where to get that question answered. I'm not going to bother with reading the rest of the stuff just to know that I read through it. So really, the answer I would give you is it's just about experience. It's about finding the ways to know how you do it and then defending that time, but also not being unreasonable at that time. You know what your church needs at this moment. You also know that if you're heading into a pretty busy week, that there might be some other things you need to adjust. Adjust that reaction time. Don't adjust your preparation time. That needs to be defended just at all costs. Another question that I got, it came in with this, is, how do you handle the overwhelming aspects of pastoral duties without burning out? Had a couple of more questions around this, and this is what I would say. I think, you need to know yourself. You need to know who you are and how you do things, because I think that so many times the ways that we can enter into burnout is when we are having to not be ourselves. That's really the big thing. When you're not able to be yourself inside of ministry and to do things in a way that's healthy for you, that it causes energy, going back to that draining, dealing and developing, going into Clifton strengths, all of that sort of thing. To me, I think pastoral burnout in many ways is a loss of identity. And that when we begin losing our identity, we begin doing all these sorts of unhealthy things that we think are going to help us reclaim our identity. So there's that question right there. And we've kind of come into this productive. I've heard from a lot of folks, they kind of appreciate the brevity of productive pastor. So we're 20 minutes in or so. Not going to just kind of make you run down on the rest of that, but hopefully you've kind of got an idea of what a Q&A might look like. I would love to do more Q&A episodes. You got a question, just get to me and say, hey Chad, this is for the next Q&A episode. Here's my question. This is what I love to hear about it, because I love to answer it for you. Love to help you out inside of that. Talked about some resources in this episode, both of my courses, Becoming Productive and Trello for Ministry. A lot of the way that I tend to operate, I've answered those sorts of questions and try to create tools around inside of that. Also want to let you know about something else new at Comp. I've got a new course coming out, and it's only going to be for sale on Memorial Day weekend. Rather than have it out there always and always be referring to it, I'm just going to be selling it Memorial Day weekend. And this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a template course. And it's going to be this massive drop of productivity templates, day stuff, week stuff, month stuff, year stuff, ways to understand and manage your day-to-day, ways to do weekly planning meetings with yourself, I've got worksheets about how to have meetings with people and how to take notes, all that sort of stuff. And it's only going to be available Memorial Day weekend. It's going to go on sale on Friday, and then on Monday, it's done. It's gone. That's it. And it's not going to be crazy expensive. This is the way I kind of want to do course stuff from now on out is like that. So if you're excited about that, keep your eyes peeled, but also come into the Productive Pastor community and say, Chad, this template thing sounds wild. You get to build your own customizable planner, my friends. That's what this is about. I've had folks ask me for ages about, am I going to do a notebook or do a planner, that sort of thing. And I'm not going to, there's a rabbit I'd like to chase that I'm not going to chase. But yeah, we're going to do that, but we're going to do it through templates. And I'm also going to, inside of that, give you a couple of ways that I've learned to create templates and what does it might mean for you to create your own customized system, because this is the deal. You know your ministry, you know your context, you know your culture. Hopefully you know yourself and you can create these things for yourself. So I'm going to show you how I've done that and give you some starting off points inside of that Memorial Day template course. But I'll be back in the next episode. Thanks for sticking around. 100+ episodes of Productive Pastor. It's always an honor to be here with you. Hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Good time in worship. And I'll see you back next time. Thanks for being awesome and stay productive.